The execution of Judge Kevin Mullins inside his chambers in September of 2024 exposed a long-time scandal inside the Letcher County judicial system. In January of 2022, two women inmates, Susan Adkins and Jennifer Hill, filed a lawsuit against then-Deputy Ben Fields and the Letcher County Sheriff. According to the suit, Fields was assigned to be the woman's home incarceration officer after she was released from the Letcher County Jail in June 2021. Then Deputy Ben Fields ran the county's home detention program. This was a contract labor position with East Kentucky Correctional Solutions, which Fields held in addition to his position in the sheriff's office. East Kentucky Correctional Solutions provided the equipment and monitoring of house arrest inmates. The equipment is what many are familiar with as ankle monitors. The suit said the woman was struggling to find housing and couldn't afford to pay for her ankle bracelet. Fields allegedly made flirtatious comments about her body and said he was confident that they could work something out. He promised to remove her ankle bracelet so she wouldn't have to pay the fees, but remain on home incarceration in exchange for sexual favors, according to the lawsuit. The woman said she and Fields met several times at the Letcher County Courthouse. The sexual abuse would take place after hours in the judge's chambers because there were no cameras there. Fields would then put the woman's ankle monitor back on the night before a court appearance. In response to the lawsuit, Ben Fields filed a complaint against the woman saying she had escaped custody and was not complying with the terms of her home incarceration. Despite knowing this was a false statement, the lawsuit said Fields did this to punish the woman and save his own job and reputation. According to the suit, an arrest warrant was issued for her and she was arrested. Someone in the courthouse learned of the inappropriate exchange and had text messages between the two regarding the allegations. When Fields learned of this, the lawsuit says he stopped communicating with the woman. Ned Pillersdorf, the attorney for claimant, Sabrina Adkins, has been on a press tour discussing the lawsuits which may have been the catalyst of Judge Mullins' death. Here are some clips of what he said.
If you're on an ankle bracelet or in a drug court, in Kentucky, you're very vulnerable to sexual exploitation. Today, his defense attorney apparently linked my lawsuit to the case. Now, that can cut, a number of different ways. The lawsuit was almost a frontal assault on the Letcher County Courthouse. I early on told NBC News that they turned that courthouse, the sheriff's department, into a brothel. It wasn't just one woman they were exploiting, it was a number of women. And, maybe that statement maybe was over the top, but there's something going on there where women were being exploited. And, one of the reasons I have been talking to the media, the reality is if you walk into a Kentucky courtroom today, what you will see is something I didn't see when I started practicing law in Kentucky 43 years ago. You will see women charged with drug charges, probably half my criminal practice. And what has happened, the good news is we've had a wonderful expansion of drug courts and women in drug courts, ankle bracelet programs. But what's not really talked about, and what this case illustrates, how vulnerable these women are to sexual exploitation. That's why we named Sheriff Stines as a defendant. We don't know whether Judge Mullins was connected to the case or not. We know the sex occurred in his chambers, and we know it was a judge's bailiff. We basically alleged that there was a significant problem with the ankle bracelet program and that these women were being easily sex-extorted, if that's a word. One of the reasons we filed the lawsuit was we didn't think what happened to Miss Atkins and Miss Hill were isolated incidents, or Miss Cornett as well, that the reality is in Kentucky courts, lots of women are charged and they end up on ankle bracelets. Sometimes it's the only way we can keep them out of jail. And the lawsuit we filed basically alleged that this was a significant problem in the Letcher County Courthouse. Keep in mind the defendant, Fields, who eventually pled guilty, was not only running the ankle bracelet program, he was also a bailiff and deputy sheriff. So the context of the lawsuit was we named Sheriff Stines in his official capacity because our position was he knew or should have known this was going on. And in fairness to Sheriff Stines and the defendants, basically Stines denied any knowledge. I mean, that's their side of the lawsuit. The lawsuit is still pending. But the context of the lawsuit was for us to ask Stines information we had learned during our investigation. He generally denied knowledge, which I think is fair. They know that a simple phone call from the ankle bracelet person to the judge, they're back in jail. These women know if they say that's not true, they probably won't be believed.
You know, they turned that courthouse kind of into a brothel for several years. And there's been speculation in the local newspaper that perhaps the reason why they suddenly added cameras to the judge's chambers was over the lawsuit I filed. I filed the lawsuit January of 22. Thereafter, we told the Attorney General's office, hey, we have these sexual test messages from the gentleman controlling the ankle bracelet that my client was on that left no doubt that they were having a sexual relationship. And 7 months later, the ankle bracelet, the deputy sheriff, Ben Fields, was indicted, and he pled guilty this past January.
The position with East Kentucky Correctional Solutions was a contract labor job for the supervision of the ankle monitoring. The position paid via commission at $25 a hookup per person and then $3 a day. Ben Fields made $30,000 in 2021 with East Kentucky Correctional Solutions. Fields was terminated by Sheriff Stines in February of 2022 for violating the sheriff's ethical standards policy. Prior to his termination, he was allowed to wear his deputy uniform while he was performing service for East Kentucky Correctional Solutions during court hours or immediately after. When asked, Stines admitted Fields had absolutely violated the sexual misconduct policy, but he did not reference sexual misconduct in the letter due to County Attorney Hatton's guidance. In September of 2022, a grand jury indicted Fields on several charges stemming from the inappropriate relationship he had with multiple women. Fields eventually entered guilty pleas on 1 count of rape in the 3rd degree, 1 count of sodomy in the 3rd degree, 2 counts of tampering with a prisoner monitoring device, and 1 count of perjury in the 2nd degree, and he was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. An interesting question that came from the claimant's attorney was whether Mickey's supervisors, the sheriff at the time, had any sort of agreement with East Kentucky Correctional Solutions. Pillersdorf has pointed out, there are no regulations for these companies that provide the equipment and monitor the prisoners. Could there have been kickbacks for the use of this company?